Welcome to Cardboard Hunter. I'm your host Sterling, and today we're doing something very, very exciting. Something I've been kind of working on for a few months now. Anyone in my Discord knows how long this has taken, and I apologize. But yeah, we're finally here. This is the top 20 racing board games of all time. Needless to say, this was no easy venture because I wanted to make sure every game on this list I physically played. And I already have a lot of racing games. Anyone who knows me in person and plays board games with me knows that that's one of my favorite genres in the hobby. But I didn't even think I had 10 games to start with, primarily because I take culling very serious. And maybe I'll make a video about cull culture at some point in the future. And needless to say, I couldn't just pick 20 games, buy them if I didn't already have them, play them, and then reorganize them. That wouldn't be fair to what I'm doing here. So I bought a lot of games. Don't tell my partner. I started this journey, obviously, with a lot of research. I ended up building a list of about 50 board games that I thought had potential here. And I shaved that down to about 30 through extensive research, some online play, and just knocking some games off that were impossible, if not way too hard to actually get my hands on. A few of the games I really went out of my way on, one of which took over a month to ship in from Germany because I didn't want to miss anything that I really thought belonged on this list. However, it's probably inevitable that I did. So if there's anything that doesn't make the list, please tell me in the comments what that is. I'd love to check it out. And I'll tell you what I thought about it if I did try to include it, or if I just couldn't find it. But yeah, it was painful. There were a couple really good games that I bought with my money and waited a long time and then had to schedule playing that didn't make the cut. And we're not going to do the whole honorable mentions or anything in this video. We're already covering 20 board games, 10 in this video, 10 in the next video. So we're just going to get straight to it. I will pause for a moment to explain how I organized the list. So it was already really hard to set the boundaries of what and what was not going to be considered a racing game, because there were some games I cut just because I felt like they weren't quite true enough to it. While you might be surprised at some of the games that made the list that I felt were close enough. But once I actually got down to about 25 games, I started rating them on a 3-tier system. The most important first tier is racing simulation. How much does it actually make me feel like I'm simulating a race? The second criteria is fun factor. A board game needs to be fun. Pretty important, but also the game feeling more like racing, I still prioritized. And then the third criteria is mechanics, originality, how seamless they are. Did they do the best with what they had? Was it just taking from other games? Was it clever? You know, that kind of thing. All three of those rated from 1 to 10. I added that up. And in the case of ties, those three criteria in that order, racing simulation, fun factor, mechanics, broke the tie. And in case of a three-way tie between all three scores, I choose which one actually goes ahead and behind, though I don't think that actually happened. So as we go through each game on this list, today is going to be 20 through 11. I will give their score of all three criteria, and I'll also give a little bit of an idea of who I think this game is for. Because a lot of people probably think, oh, I'll just watch the top 10 video and buy the top 5, maybe 10 games and call it a day. I don't think that would be the right play because every game is a snowflake. Every game is right for someone. The number 20 game will be more right for some people than even the number 1 game. So I'm going to do my best to kind of guide you through that so you know which ones may be a better fit for you and your group. To kind of give you a heads up, I plan on keeping 10 of the 20, and they will not be the top 10. They will be a mix of both. And then I'll, I guess, sell or give away the other 10 because I do not need 20 racing games. Do I need 20 racing games? I might need 20. I might need 30 racing games if we're being real here. So let's get to it. Some of these are going to be heavy and a pain. But number 20, Thunder Road Vendetta. Now, this one is based on an older game, Thunder Road, And there's not a ton of mechanic changes, but they definitely took a good idea and made it a great game. And this is a great example of a number 20 that could be more right for your group than number 1. Without giving any spoilers for number 1, if your group likes the kickstarty stuff, if they like Ameritrash, if they just are here for a quick teach, a ton of fun, blowing stuff up, then yeah, this is definitely going to be a better fit than what the number 1 game will be. Okay, so the scores for Thunder Road Vendetta, it got a 4 out of 10 for racing. It's much more of a battler than a racer, but enough to qualify for the list. It got a 7 out of 10 for the fun factor, so very high fun factor. That is what makes this game shine. If your group is not as concerned about the actual feeling of racing and being true to a simulator, then this is probably a great choice. And then mechanics, another 4 out of 10. It's not doing a lot. Look, it knows what it's doing and it does them right. But yeah, it's certainly not winning any mechanics awards. And ultimately, that's why it's so far down the list. If I'm being honest, fun factor is everything. But this is a racing list, so Racing Sim is still qualifying higher than the fun factor. I absolutely love this game. Since it came out, I've described it as the McDonald's of board gaming. And what I mean by that is it's quick. It is better than it has any business being. You almost feel guilty admitting how good it is. And then when you have to put it back up, you question everything and every reason that brought you to this point. Restoration Games has been killing it. This is a bit fringe, as far as a racing game goes. It's much more of a battling game where the cars are pitting against each other, slamming into each other to take positioning. There's helicopters that have missiles on them, blowing up cars. You're knocking cars into mountains. I mean, absolute frenzy of just bombs and destruction. It's Mad Max the board game. I think there was a Mad Max the board game. That is not Mad Max the board game. This is Mad Max the board game. I do have the Maximum Chrome edition, and I'll be honest, I think I miss the retail edition I initially had because, it's kind of the whole Kickstarter thing. You get the giant big box, and it's so rare you actually get it out because there's so many components to go through, and the retail box accomplishes what the game's meant to accomplish, and it's just easier to table. So this might be one of the games that I actually recommend go for retail first, maybe upgrade if you guys end up playing it a ton. I genuinely thought I was going to do that when I got it, but like all board gamers that have no control over how big their collection is getting, this one has been on the top shelf for a while, as you can see the dust coming off of it. Okay, so this is moving us to, wait, I said 20 on that one, right? That was 20. Okay, moving into number 19. And I'm going to be honest, this is going to hurt some people's feelings that this didn't get higher. This is a classic Reiner Knizia, The Quest for El Dorado. And it is a great game. I'm embarrassed that it's number 19 because it's a Knizia. If you saw my collection, you would think that I was actually living in Knizia's basement, which I'm not. Don't tell him. But this is actually a great game, and I cannot iterate enough that the games in the top 20 are still great games. There's just so many great racing games. The fact that there's 10 better than this 10 does not mean these are not brilliant games. So El Dorado gets a 5 out of 10 as far as racing simulation goes. You do feel like you are racing to a point, especially towards the end of the game. And I'll be honest, that's more important to me. There are some games that I feel very much like a race until the end, and it kind of becomes a little bit of a free-for-all, like a catch-up mechanic gone wrong. And this is the opposite of that. This is at the end, the pressure is on. Everyone is giving it everything they've got. They are regretting every decision that put them so far behind. And yeah, that to me is where the magic of this game happens. You do have to cut through the weeds, so to say, to get there, though. Fun factor, 6 out of 10. Great game. A 6 out of 10 is something that should be tabled any game night. That's a great game. And then mechanics, 4 out of 10. So I want to talk about the mechanics because this is ultimately what put it so far down the list. And there's really two issues going on with El Dorado. The first issue is It's a very limited deck building game, which I actually tend to like the more limited deck building style versus the crazy and do you ever even find the cards you purchase style of deck building. Like Forbidden Stars is one of my favorites. It's extremely limited. It feels like every time you go to play your deck again, you almost immediately fill your recent choices. I like that. Here, not only is it limited, the variety is very much limited. And it's like, there's only so many things. This card does that, and then there's cards that put little twists on things. And, you know, it just, there's not a lot of diversity. Everyone is playing with very similar decks at the end of the day. And then the second mechanic, which is honestly, it's a slap on the wrist for Mr. Knizia because you could have done better here. You could, like, not only could you have done better, you could have just done what everyone does for this. And that is the market. So the cards that you will be adding to your deck are in a market. And instead of the typical style where you would just flip 5 to 10 cards and, you know, as they get purchased, a new one fills their spot, that's not how the market works here. Instead, all of the various cards are laid out on the table and you have access to like 5 or 6 to start with. Once one is exhausted, then you could pick any of the others and then that takes the place of the last one. So it's like, temporarily, if you're just in the right place, right time, you have access to everything to choose from. And then everyone else has access to only what they've had access to the whole time, except for now some new cards that another player just added. It's like it compounds into the sameness of everyone playing such a similar deck. Whereas a more modern shuffled deck and then laying them out, you would have actually come out with people playing more diverse decks, and the game probably would have been better for that. So it's kind of one of those things where a designer tried to do something cool and different and ended up with results that were less good than the default. I do like the traversing through the jungle thing. I think it's a fun game. I think it's very cool. I would never turn down this at a game night, just to be clear. But yeah, it shows up really high on other racing top 10 lists. And, you know, I think its age is showing, if I'm being honest. Okay, this brings us to 18. 18 is very exciting. So this is one of the first really difficult games that I had to hunt down. And I'm going to be honest with you, for the amount of work and money that went into bringing this here, I certainly hoped it would place higher than 18. But, you know, I actually love this game. Like I said before, the 10 games I keep will not necessarily be the top 10 games. This will be a game I keep forever, I think. I love this game, but I still have to be honest with this list. This is not a top 10 my favorite racing games. This is me trying to really determine the 10 and 20 best racing games ever made. So let's talk about this beauty. And man, I love the cover. Is that not just clean and elegant? I love it. TurfMaster, one word. Deluxe, no E. Fantastic. So the score here, we got a 7 out of 10 racing sim. And you know, on the surface, you probably would have thought this would have done better. I certainly did here, but it has this weird dice mechanic where a round consists of 2 parts. First by being played by a unique card, and then secondly by a dice roll where everyone moves the same amount. I haven't really figured out what the purpose of that dice roll is to the game yet. I mean, I haven't had a chance to play it a lot. It's never made me dislike that part of the round. I've just always kind of, we just do it and move on. Like nothing interesting has really ever happened except one time it pushed someone into winning, and it wasn't that interesting. I don't think they would have lost anyway. There's certainly points where you could use the dice to kind of screw up someone in the lead, and you know, you could just play your cards better. Anyway, I'm not critiquing that part of the mechanic. I just don't quite understand why it's there. But because of that, there's that factor to the racing where I lost a bit of immersion. Other than that, a 7 out of 10 is still very good in a racing simulation. I do like that you have a dedicated horse and you are giving it everything you've got to get that horse across the line. It's a very exciting game. Simple, to the point, great fun. speaking of fun, I had to give it a 5 out of 10. And I know I just got through talking about how fun it is and how much I love it. But keep in mind, this is all based on games on the list. So it's just, we have so many brilliant games that this one I found approximately half as fun as the most fun game on this list. It is still very fun. I do believe Thunder Road Vendetta being 2 points ahead of it fun factor is accurate, but this is a beer and pretzel game. This is a pull it out, people are having a couple beers. It's something you can still converse, still be social while playing, and you don't take it too serious. It's not a game that's going to have you, oh my God, you know, but it takes so little brain power that it's refreshing. It's the ginger of the board game evening. You know, you slot this right in between some overly complex games, and it's a nice palate cleanser. Still very fun, love it. But yeah, I think a 5 out of 10 is fair. And then mechanics, 4 out of 10. It's just a very simple game. The only critique I have is, like I was saying, the dice mechanic, I just don't totally get. If anyone is familiar with this and actually has figured out why the dice mechanic is so important and makes the game so much better for it, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. But I'm going to keep playing this. I am going to keep this one. Oh, I also forgot to mention which of the 2 previous games I would be keeping. And I just checked my list to make sure I had it all right. And there will be 11 out of the top 20 games that actually stay in my collection, at least for now. Again, I'm a culling maniac, so anything can happen. But so far, El Dorado and Thunder Road will likely both be leaving my collection. TurfMaster will be staying. This brings us to number 17, which I do have an expansion for. I'm not rating any games on this list based on expansions, by the way. There are a few here that I have expansions for that are just exciting and I want to show them off. But this one I only recently got and have not had a chance to play yet. But Cubitos from AEG is so good. It's literally so much better than it has any business being. And like, I was worried it was going to break the top 10 and no one was going to take me serious. I cannot help how much I love this game. Thank God that I actually set out some rules and some structure to how the scoring would work, because if I was just picking my personal top 10 racing games, it would have done well. It definitely would have broke the top 10. So, Racing Sim, 4 out of 10, and I genuinely think I'm probably being generous there. The racing aspect, I mean, it is still a racing game. There's some weird choices they made, and it has no business working, and I love it. But yeah, as far from a racing sim, God. Okay, I'm not going to start critiquing it. We gave it a 4 out of 10. Because there still is some racing. You still feel like you got to hurry and get there. That's the whole reason you get the dice. Fun factor, 8 out of 10. I may be being a bit conservative there too, if I'm being honest. This is one of those games that just, I get so enamored with. I just get thrilled. Like, it's a game that has you, when I say handfuls of dice, you know, I feel like there's a lot of games that people describe as, oh, you're chunking a handful of dice. No, I mean a literal metric ton of dice. Like, you are filling your hand, and sometimes you need 2, and throwing them, and the dice will, you know, typically half of the faces will have something on them, the other half will be blank, and you're sitting here doing the math, and you're like, mathematically, it's not even possible to roll all blanks, baby. And you throw them, and this game defies all mathematics to the point where there's no way Einstein knew what he was talking about. This game proves that. But I had to tone myself down. I couldn't let this one run away with it. I think 8 out of 10 is fair because it is subjective to what I think a 10 out of 10 game is. And then mechanics, 5 out of 10. It takes from another game, which is on the list, and I'm not going to spoil it, so not naming it, but it borrows a really brilliant mechanic and modernizes it and really ups the fun factor, but it kind of bastardizes it. It kind of turns it a bit into an Ameritrash thing, and it's certainly less impressive. It works. This game is exactly how it should be, and I cannot wait to try the expansion foul play. I don't even know what it does, but it's got new boxes full of dice, and how can you go wrong? I'm assuming it adds another player. Oh, 2 to 6. It adds 2 more players. Ooh, I like that. Absolutely fantastic. This will be staying in my collection for probably a very long time. This is a game that even if I only played it once a year or once every 2 years, I'm going to have so much fun with it. I'm never going to want to let this go. You know, I hear other people compare this to Quacks of Quedlinburg as far as push your luck. I like Quacks. Don't get me wrong. This is a whole different ballgame. Way better. And number 16 is Expedition Northwest Passage. Number 16 is Expedition Northwest. Can I not say this? Northwest a Passage. I'm going to leave all that in. Why not? This one, very interesting. Okay, my Euro fans who are here, I don't know why you're here. That's not what we're doing today, but I brought something for you too. This is a brilliant Euro game disguised as a racing game, and it very much is a racing game. But let's go over its score. So, Racing Sim, 4 out of 10. It is much more of a Euro game than a racing game, but it qualifies. Fun factor, 6 out of 10. This is nice. This is, you know, I've talked about this before, how Euros are kind of broken up into 2 primary categories. You have your modern Euros, which are born of your Lacerdas and Rosenbergs, and even your Wingspans, and the Dragon game. What is the Dragon game? Why am I drawing a blank? Anyway, I don't care for it at all. So who cares? And then you have your German Euros, which are born from the original Euro style, which was much more combative. Whereas the more modern Euros are all about, you've got your own player board. You're kind of doing your own thing. Very limited player interaction. German Euros are born kind of your chess and other abstract strategies. So there's typically a shared board and you're very much competing directly with each other. They tend to be more social. They tend to be more kind of punching each other in the face. And I like that. So this is kind of a hybrid of the two. So it's certainly more modern Euro. You are working with a player board. You are doing your own thing mostly, but you very much are competing on a main board and obstructing each other, blocking each other, and taking resources that the other may have wanted. And it's nice. You know, if I have a game night and I know I'm playing with some Euro fans, modern Euro fans, this is where we can meet in the middle. I have decided at this point that this one will likely not stay in my collection. I'm not considering this part of the 11, though I may give this to someone I play with because I still want to play it, and it's kind of hard to come by. Oh, they are doing a reprint. I think they did a Kickstarter or some kind of crowdfunding project that has already finished, but they should be delivering within the year, and it's beautiful. Maybe I'll revisit it once that edition comes out. This is still a very beautiful edition. Like, if you think this game is right for you, go for this one. Don't even wait on the other. There's not that much change. Oh, and I didn't finish the score, did I? So we said a 4 racing sim, 6 fun factor, and an 8 out of 10 for mechanics. This game is brilliant. It takes the idea of a racing game and gives you something you never expected. It's played by starting on one side of the board. What is it, like Greenland? Yeah, I think it's Greenland, and you're trying to make it to the Northwest Passage, which I'm sure means something in the real world, but I am no geography buff, so you will be racing from one side and then racing back to Greenland. You're effectively trying to be the first to discover it, and throughout this race to point A and then back to point B, you will be researching and discovering other smaller things that will build up your score. It's a game won on victory points, bit pointsality. And normally I'm against that, but I really like this game. And what really makes this so genius mechanically is throughout the game, the sun is changing positions, which is effectively the seasons changing as you guys are on this expedition. And because of that, the ocean actually freezes, turns into ice, and then thaws back out, turning back into ocean. So at first, you're racing with your boats, but then as the ocean gets harder and harder to traverse because it's freezing, you are letting out sleds and moving your workers because it kind of is worker placement. I wouldn't call it that, but you have workers that you are placing in certain spots. Anyway, you can move workers from the ship to the sled and vice versa. So you're sending your sled out to do what you couldn't quite finish with your ship, and then hurry and get back before the water thaws again to get back up on the ship and get back to Greenland. It is honestly so fun. I really can't recommend this one enough. If you are a Euro fan, especially a modern Euro fan, this may very well be the #1 game on this list for you. I'm trying to think. I think I have something else for you on this. I've got at least one other game on here that would definitely tickle the modern Euro brain, but this one to me is the #1, especially if you like the Vladimir Suchy games like Underwater Cities, Shipyard. What was the recent one he did? I'm gonna draw a blank. I don't got it. Tell me in the comments. Evacuation! Oh my goodness. If you like those styles of Euros, I'm telling you, this is the game on the list for you and your group. And speaking of the other Euro brain tickling game, we have where are we at? 15. Yeah, I threw all your games on the top 20. You ain't making it in the top 10 as a Euro. Let's be honest. This is Steampunk Rally Fusion. This game is fantastic. This one was hard to decide whether or not I was going to keep it or call it. I did decide to call just because there are so many games to choose from. But let's go over the score. So Racing Sim, 5 out of 10. You know, the halfway point, you definitely are aware of the board. You are making choices to get through that board, but more of the choices are on your player area, which we'll describe in a second. Fun factor, 6 out of 10. A nice 6. 6 is good. 6 is good. Let's be honest. Northwest Passage was a 6. This is a 6. 6 is good. Very fun game. I mean, if your group actually likes Wingspan, I don't know why they would, then you guys are going to love this. And then Mechanics, a 7 out of 10. So it's certainly not as spectacular mechanically as Northwest Passage, but what you are effectively doing is building your contraption, your machine, your racing abomination of gears and metal and steam, and trying to just get this thing to crawl or fly or jump or drive across the finish line. It's got a cool drafting round where you get one of each different types of part that can be added to your vehicle, where you're going to choose which one you want and then pass either to the left or to the right. And every round will start with one of these drafting rounds. So you want to get the best stuff you can. You want to kind of screw over the person you're sending the cards to and, you know, see what you get left with. And you're building these really cool vehicles, and all the parts you're trying to complement each other. Some of them may do damage to the vehicle itself, and you don't want to blow up your vehicle before you finish the race. So some of your parts may be specifically just to help repair the damage that other parts are doing, and some parts are to move the vehicle, whereas some parts are to attack other vehicles. And it's really clever. You know, I know there's a lot of other games that get called like a Mario Kart. This one, not so much, but it definitely has that element to it. You definitely feel like you're racing in this kind of wacky type race. This is the Fusion version. They do have the original base Steampunk Rally. This is kind of a standalone expansion. They can be combined. I just went with Fusion because I liked some of the additional things they added. I like the Fusion dice that they added, which are kind of like a wild dice, though they have their drawbacks. And this is just great fun. This is one of those games that everyone's going to be cracking up and having a great time around the table the whole time you're playing. And I think I did mention, but Steampunk Rally Fusion will not be staying in the collection, though I was tempted. I was very tempted. Number 14, another Reiner Knizia. This is Winner's Circle. So Winner's Circle is fantastic. And this is the Dice Tree edition, which I just love the Dice Tree games. I have this Modern Art, another Knizia, and then I have another Dice Tree game. I love they look like books. Anyway, that's besides the point. Beautiful production value. The horses in this copy are painted. They're very beautiful. The metal coins. Oh my God, I love it. This is kind of an overgrown Long Shot the Dice game. I guess probably more similar to the original Long Shot. But I did not include Long Shot the Dice game or the original because I think the dice game version of it really does replace the original, and it just didn't quite feel enough towards the racing for me to actually qualify it. It's a little bit more gambling and betting than really racing. Whereas this still has a lot of that in it, but it does still feel enough like a racing game that I was okay including it. But yeah, wherever that boundary is between Winner's Circle and Long Shot the Dice game, that's where the cutoff happened. So let's go over the score for this one. So we have a 7 out of 10 racing sim. You know, it's horse racing, horse betting, horse racing. So you do not have a single horse. You are betting on various horses. But much like real horse betting, you do your bets on the front end. You're not changing your bet as you're going. You place your bets, and then those horses are racing, and you're doing everything in your power to see your horses get to the lead and the horses you didn't bet on get to the back. And it feels very simulation-like in that regards. You know, it's got a couple little wacky aspects. So, you know, 7 out of 10, respectful. 6 out of 10 in terms of fun factor. Now, this very well could exceed that 6 out of 10. The few times I've got to play this one leading up to this list have maybe not been with the best groups for the game. I feel like I tend to be the one enjoying it the most. I think I need to table this with a few different groups because I think I just haven't found which one of my groups this shines with the best. Though I don't think I'm keeping it. So maybe I won't. Maybe I'll hold on to it just for a little bit to make sure that that's not the issue, that there's not, you know, some perfect group that turns this into an 8 or a 9 out of 10 fun factor. But as it stands, it will be leaving my collection. And as we've already described, a 6 out of 10 fun factor is A-okay. And then mechanics is a 5 out of 10. That's what held this one back the most. It is extremely simple, much like Knizia's other game on this list. However, this one I feel like the choices he did make were the best choices to make. He just didn't get over elaborate with it. Whereas El Dorado, I feel like he actually could have made better choices. But this one is just as it should be. Fantastic game. Always down to break this one out. If you have Long Shot in your collection, then you probably don't need both. But if you've been looking at Long Shot and hadn't picked it up, this is definitely an option to consider beforehand. A little harder to get, a little more money, but if you want something with a little bit more table presence, then this is good. I mean, I'm keeping TurfMaster, which is probably why I'm not keeping these other horse games, but it's arguably a better game than TurfMaster. Who am I kidding? It's a proven fact it's a better game. We just did the math. This brings us to number 13, which is our other dice tree game that I didn't want to mention a second ago, though I bet a few people already figured it out. It is Ave Caesar by Wolfgang Reitesser. What other games has Wolfgang Reitesser made? Let me know in the comments. So this is a classic, brilliant racing game that I've seen in the #1 spot on several different top 10 racing game lists. And I get why. I get why. Personally, I think it's a number 13 game, not a #1 game. But yeah, let's jump into the score and talk about why. So number 13, Ave Caesar, got a 6 out of 10 racing sim. So that was a big hit for it not cracking the top 10, is because you don't quite get 100% of that I feel like I'm racing. Fun factor, 7 out of 10. This is a very fun game. This is a game that you're almost certainly going to enjoy every play of. In fact, I can't think of anyone I've ever tabled this with who hasn't at least had a good time. Maybe it's not their favorite game of all time, but you know, people are going to enjoy it. It's very simple to figure out. It's got a very limited deck building system, which is kind of similar to El Dorado. It just is a little too simple for what it's doing. There's not much diversity between each other. But in this game, it makes a little more sense. There's not a huge board I'm trying to get to the other side of. This is, you know, a little tighter. I forgive the sin of the limited deck building here. And then mechanics, 6 out of 10. Like I said, I don't have trouble forgiving that decision because it does make sense for this game. I really like the fact that the leader can't play the higher cards, which gives you a little bit of a catch-up mechanic. I do like the fact that once during the game, you have to get off of the track and take this little slow, narrow direction just to pay homage to Caesar, as all should. And it's even written in the rules that when you do pay homage to Caesar, that you flip a coin towards Caesar and yell, Ave Caesar, as all should. And yeah, fantastic. God, this one's not making the cut either, is it? It's not staying in the collection. I didn't know. Oh, it hurts. Look, I had to make some hard choices, but a few of those that didn't make the cut, you know, they hurt, but this one really hurts. This is just one I like having in the collection. Ooh. Am I married to these decisions? We already said I could have 30 games. As of now, it's leaving. I'm so sorry. Number 12. Daytona 500, baby. Y'all didn't see that shit coming, did you? Hit the air horns. Yeah, where the hell did I get this dinosaur from? Look at this. It's not Daytona 500, chill. But, oh my God, this is not beautiful. This is a phenomenal game. This one I will keep, just to be clear, because this is a collector item. And I'm going to go into some detail here in a second. But this is not part of the 11. This is not actually on the list, technically. But Daytona 500 is one of those hidden gems from the past. When was this released? 1990? I bet it's even older than that. Old school Milton Bradley Monopoly style box that had no business being as good as it is. And you're wondering why I pulled this out. Because number 12 on the list is actually a reprint of this. And I bet everyone watching this is going to know this game and had no idea that it came from Daytona 500. Number 12 is DownForce. Yes, from Restoration Games, DownForce was a reimagining of Daytona 500 with a lot fewer rule changes and mechanic changes than you probably think. They are, I won't say identical. They are very similar. I do think that some of the changes that happen in DownForce do improve upon it, but honestly, the Daytona 500 game starts with a very different auctioning phase for how you're picking your cars. Anyone who's played DownForce knows that there's a pretty cool auction phase on how you determine who gets what car, because each car has a unique ability and how much you're going to spend on them at the beginning of the race. Daytona 500 has a little bit more combative way of choosing the cars. I actually prefer it. I do tend to play the DownForce version, but I will sometimes just use the Daytona mechanic for the DownForce. I'm not going to actually play this one. The pieces are in shambles. Like I said, it's a collector's item. So I need to add a caveat to this one, because this is number 12 with one home rule that to me is mandatory. If this game does not have that home rule, it does not crack the top 20. It might still crack the top 20, but certainly nowhere near the position of 12. The necessity of this home rule to me is so absolute that I am mind blown it is not actually part of the game. When I realized what happens with the mechanic in the game and how much better it plays with this rule instead, I dug through the rule book. I was like, no, that has to be the way it works. Of course that's the way it works. It's not. What I'm talking about is the betting system, because this is a game that is won by who has the most money at the end, not necessarily who crosses the finish line at the end. Though your car's finishing at higher positions does make you more money, so you still have to do well. But my problem is, when people have played this a few times, they start realizing the best way to do it is only bet on your car. And then all you have to focus on is the race. And if you've only bet on yourself and you come in first, nobody can beat you. And though that makes it a little bit more of a racing sim, this game's not meant to be a racing sim. And that eventually turns this into a game that loses a lot of steam with more plays. It's a game that when you break out and play as intended with newer players that have never experienced this, it goes great. But after you've got 10, 20 plays under your belt, and so do the players you're playing with, you'll notice people start retracting into betting on themselves, and the game fizzles. So, what is the mandatory home rule? It's simple. Nobody's allowed to bet on themselves. I'm telling you, if you have this game, if you've played this game, if you're looking to play it in the near future, play this with no one allowed to bet on themselves. Watch how much better the game is. It's literally night and day. This game should never be played without that mechanic. It is number 12, so long as you are playing it where every player is not permitted to bet on themselves. It causes people to not only strategically place their bets on other players, it causes them to accidentally lift up the other players during play, because obviously if I'm betting to yellow, even if yellow's not my card and yellow's kind of doing well, I can make some money off that. And same thing for everyone. It gets everyone in each other's pockets, which is what this game is meant to be. There's meant to be that nuance and that confusion through, oh my God, that's good for me, but it's also bad for me. This game is brilliant because of that. And without changing that rule, that dissipates. So yes, absolutely, if you play DownForce, do not allow players to bet on themselves. Thank me later. My copy is extremely heavy because I have every expansion in this box, which is nice. A game that the original box can fit every expansion in. Oh my God, I love it. Now the scores, which I forgot about. This is a 6 out of 10 racing sim. Like I said, it's more about the betting than the racing, and also because you are controlling other players' cars too. If you're unfamiliar with Daytona, not Daytona, well, yes, Daytona, but if you're unfamiliar with DownForce or Daytona, then what you're effectively doing is out of your hand, you're playing a card that typically moves multiple cars. So you're not only moving yourself ahead, but you're moving several of your opponents ahead. So you need to be strategic about how you do that. This in turn makes it less of a racing sim. Fun factor, 8 out of 10. That is impressive. That is great. An 8 out of 10 is a game that people will be asking you to pull out again next time. Bring that to game night. That's where this one shines. This is also, in my opinion, one of the greatest icebreaker games for someone new to the hobby, to just show them what modern board games can do. You know, if they've only played the old classics that we all grew up on, this is a cool, refreshing, oh my God, board games can do that? And then mechanics, 5 out of 10. One of these dings is because they should incorporate that rule into the rule book. It's absurd that they've not done so yet. But also, it is very simple. It does just kind of take a 1990 or older game and slightly tweak it. It's, you know, its age shows, but the fun factor, this game sings. It will be staying in my collection, as will Daytona. And this brings us to number 11, which is the last game we'll discuss today, Formula D. And I'm sure everyone watching this that are racing game fans were wondering when this one was going to pop up. It did not quite break top 10, and I'll explain why, but it is certainly in my top 10 favorite racing games. But this one, more than most, shows its age and includes some mechanic choices that are not necessarily looked on with favor these days. So let's go over the score. So 8 out of 10 racing sim. You genuinely feel the pressure of this race. This is one of those games that was kind of the default racing game forever until Heat all of a sudden took over. Now everyone loves Heat, which, yes, I know it hasn't shown up yet. It's gonna show up. Yeah, it did break the top 10. You know, I kind of wished it wouldn't have, just to piss off all of the Heat fans, but I was honest. It's not in this video because it's in the next one. It's not number 1. But Formula D was the go-to racing game before that. And before I get on the tangent, let's finish the scores. So, fun factor, 7 out of 10. Now, the reason it got a 7 out of 10 instead of a 10 out of 10, it wouldn't have got a 10 out of 10, but it very much could have got the 8. But the thing is, there is a good bit of downtime. I like this game the most with higher player counts. It's very fun, but those higher player counts have you really sitting on the sidelines, not really involved with other players' turns. You can lose focus. It's one of those older board games that you can have people going on their phones and losing interest. I am a maniac, so I stay glued to it. But yeah, I couldn't quite go any higher than 7 just because it does lose a little oomph with those higher player counts. And then mechanics, 4 out of 10. That's what held this game from breaking top 10, because it is an older game with mechanics that do show their age, and those mechanics are roll to move. So it is at least clever. It puts a twist on roll to move. So you have a set of polyhedral dice that go from your typical sizes to a big giant D30. For example, your 4 is not 1, 2, 3, 4. I think it's just 2 and 3. And every one of the dice have a range on them instead of what you expect. So when you roll it, you there's a mid-range you're usually going to land around. You know what the max is, you know what the minimum is. And so you're deciding what gear to go into, which determines what dice you will roll, and then you move that many spaces. Now, it is one of those old school racing games with a ton of gray spaces, and you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Shit. How many was that? 1, 2. You get what I'm saying. The corners are interesting. Other games have definitely done corners better, but I think this was the first one that really kind of came with a cool twist. So I am at least giving it credit for being so original and ahead thinking at that time. There is some asymmetry here with the different cards in the advanced mode. There are more expansions than anyone knows what to do with. I've got number 6. I don't even know how many there are. There are so many. I've actually never even played with it. And I've played this a lot, and I've had this a long time, but we just always run with the maps in it. I should play with this one soon. No particular reason. When I take it to game night, I forget to bring this. The big issue is this game, unlike some other games on the list, is the leader tends to have it easier to hold the lead. Now, they definitely have some pressure, and the more cars get on their tail, the more they're forced to make some hard decisions that could cost them that lead. But for the most part, once you get ahead, you can take it a little easier while the cars in the back have to really take risk to catch up. So it's like the opposite of a catch-up mechanic, which probably lends it more towards being a more realistic racing simulator. But in a board game, you want to feel like you can still catch up and be part of the race, which Formula D shows its age there. You're always going to have people who forget how many spaces they move, and you just get confused, or if you bump the table, oh my God, a car moving slightly, good luck figuring out where it was. Or after someone counts 20 spaces and then discusses amongst everyone what they think they're going to do, but then they, weren't hovering right. And this game has a lot of little oopsies is all I'm saying. But it is still staying in my collection. And the reason being is because every single time I've broken this game out, we have all had a ball. Now, like I said, some people might be sitting around the table kind of bored when it's not their turn, but when it is their turn, they're having a blast. We're having a blast. I absolutely love it. It's one of those games that my family has loved. This was one of the first kind of modern board games that got introduced into my family's game nights, and it's still a classic for our family game nights for that reason. My dad all the time is like, hey, when you bring a Formula D back over. But hasn't made it out in a while, primarily because I've been doing this list for a while, and anytime I'm playing racing games, it had to be to get the feel for all the ones on this list. I wasn't going back to the older classics too much. So yeah, that's the first half of our top 20, our 20 to 11. A little bit of insight on each game to determine if it's right for you and your group, our scoring system, and definitely let me know in the comments what you think. And also, let's see some guesses in the comments what you think's coming in the top 5 of the next video. I feel very confident nobody's guessing my top 3. Let me take another quick look. I ain't gonna tell you. You might get one of them. You might get one of the top 3, but you are not getting all 3. You know what's funny is one of those games in the top 3, we're going to have people watching the video that know that game, that love that game, and still didn't see it coming. And they're going to go, huh, you know what? You're right. But this was fun. Thank you so much for watching. Definitely stay tuned for the next one. I'm going to try to knock it out as quickly as possible. Like, comment, subscribe, Venmo me money, tell me my hair looks good, buy some of these racing games I don't need anymore, and see you next time. Keep chasing that cardboard.